Welcome to the Natural Healing Reel. I'm Jackie Capstick. Today, my guest is all about women. She's the founder and CEO of Period to Pause. Please help me welcome Amanda Laden. How are you, Amanda?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for coming and sharing your message with us. It sounds like it's going to be quite a message to share. So where did all of this begin for you?
Wow. So, my journey really is about my own healthcare issues that got undiagnosed for many, many years. I was really dismissed by the medical system for many years. I'm sure some women can relate to that, unfortunately. It seems that every woman I talk to has their own story of navigating something not so easy in the healthcare system, or being dismissed, having their own issues, and not even really knowing where to go to talk about it. So for me, with what I went through, and I'm happy to share this story, it was a diagnosis of something called adenomyosis, going through IVF, a miscarriage, and then ultimately having my uterus removed. So having a partial hysterectomy, almost a full hysterectomy. I just thought, this is ridiculous. We as women shouldn't have to go through this. And where do I go to have these conversations, and what are other women facing? So that's really how this came to be.
You know what? Good on you. Yeah, I have not really had that much of a problem myself. But my daughter went through a horrific time with endometriosis, surgeries in stage 4, and
Yeah.
the women that were, waking up to having their uterus or everything gone because of, it's quite, this needs to be talked about, and women need to know that there's other people out there like themselves. So good on you.
I feel like that's the thing, when you're going through whatever you're going through. I mean, for me, it was all of those stages of, the IVF, the miscarriages, the loss, the grief. And then, you're getting a body part removed, and we underestimate how much grieving there is when you have something removed from you that is part of your identity as a female, and you feel alone. And so, there's a lot of forums and chat things on the internet, and you can go down a rabbit hole, but, there also need to be safe spaces to talk about in a way where we don't judge one another, and it's shame-free, guilt-free, and we're allowed to step into all of our emotions.
Wow. Don't we all need that for all areas of our life, right? That's
Yes.
huge. But, so having a body part removed, you know what? You don't even think about that. I got like a chill when you said that, and the grieving of that, and just not having the counsel or the understanding of the emotions that are to follow with, like, say, a miscarriage. This is life altering what you're talking about here.
It is. And, even with the body part being removed, we in society, at least here in Western society, I'm in the United States, we place so much value on a woman's ability to be able to carry a baby, to be able to become a mother. And it's like the second that gets taken away, or we're not able to do that, we're devalued in some way. So you couple that with getting a prognosis or diagnosis of the only thing we can do for you is to remove your uterus. You go through such a wave of emotions, and you're sometimes not prepared. All the doctor says, because they're trained in a certain way, is, okay, we're going to remove this body part. It's a routine-ish surgery. I mean, in my case, it was a little bit more complicated. And okay, you're going to be fine. There's nothing about like, wait a second, you have to come to grips with and terms with what this means for me as a woman, what it means for my identity, what it means for me going through the grief process, and everything else that comes with all of that. And so I really hope that with what I'm doing, and even sharing my story, that women can find some solace. They can also find some camaraderie. I really firmly believe that we need to support one another even more, and not, put labels or judge when we're going through certain of these issues and traumas, and diagnoses, or, whatever it is we're facing.
Yes. And we are a society of judging each other. And it's such a horrible, horrible place when you're the one that is being judged. It is, it freezes you. You can't move. It's, why isn't she this? Why isn't she that? It's just that constant people, they don't have the time. They don't want to deal with the fact that you're having some issues. They want you to just get on your way and keep going like you always have.
Yeah. Oh, and that's a huge one, right? Because as women, at least in my case, and I think I see this with a lot of my entrepreneurial colleagues, we're expected just to like pull up our bootstraps and get moving and keep going and wear all of the hats we wear in our families, whether you're a caretaker, whether you're the person who's putting the dinner on the table at night, whether you're running a business, and then all of these things. And then you couple it with something that could bring you to your knees, whether it's a miscarriage or a diagnosis. And then we're just expected to go out and continue to live our lives and to carry on as everybody else's expectation of us. And so it's,
sorry, that's huge, right? Ding, 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 ding. Right? Is that what Oprah say? Aha. Everybody's expectation of us. And when we're not filling those shoes, well, I have had a personal experience of it, and it is no fun. It actually is debilitating. So, sorry to interrupt you, but that is a huge, huge point that you're talking about.
Yes. And, you know, I think part of this, or I know part of this, is women being able to also say, to take a pause. So, you know, with period to pause, even though we're talking about period to menopause and everything in between, it's also about being able to take a pause to have these conversations, a pause to establish our own boundaries, a pause to step into our own voices and say what we need, and also to be okay with sharing with other people, you know, what it is that what support looks like for each of us. Now, I'm under no delusions that every woman has it easy, where they might have a support system around them, or a spouse around them, or a family around them. However, I think it's really important that we're able to tap into our own awareness and say, this is what I need right now, and this is the support I need.
Yeah, the support system. And then when that falls away, then what? How do you reach out, and how do you find people that will listen? Like, I think a lot of times we just need to be heard.
Yeah, we don't need a solution.
No, and that's what happens. People want to just give you the quick fix, get that fixed up, and then come and talk to you. You're still talking about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing about our bodies and our emotions that's a quick fix. You know, like we have to do the work for ourselves. And, you know, I think part of this too is this brings me back to what you're talking about, the loss of the body part. You know, for a while, I went through something where like I didn't feel like a whole woman. I didn't feel like a whole human being, because this piece of my identity, or what I thought was going to be my identity, was stripped away. And I had to do a lot of work to come back into my body, come back into my awareness, and recognize that I'm whole regardless of whatever label gets put on to me. And I also, I mean, speaking of labels, I really don't like the label of infertile or childless, or, you know, all of these kind of things we put onto women. And so, you know, just doing the work of, I sought out a lot of practitioners that were alternative to traditional Western medicine. So acupuncturists, somatic therapists, other communities that were just forums where you could talk. And I do think now, with some of the communities we have out there, you know, we're able to allow other women who may not have all of the resources to have some access to having these conversations, and to giving them alternative ways to go and seek the support, the healthcare, and everything else that they need.
Well, and I think that to just know that you're not alone.
Yeah.
Right? And that
you're not.
the feelings that you're having, other people are also having, because I believe that we think it's just us. You know, we get into that, you know, whole, well, I mean, we're a society of victims, first of all. So we don't know how to own stuff properly to be able to release it. We just don't have, we haven't been given so many of these tools. But, you know, myself, I have had many babies. So for me, listening to this conversation it just wrenches my heart right now, because, you know, it was like every 9 years I had another. So,
right.
and I wasn't you know, I wasn't in search of doing that. And so it's interesting listening to what you're saying, because it's devastating. And I do have friends that have experienced this isn't going to work for you. And then having to go through those options and that grieving and feeling broken and feeling less than. And it's, yeah.
Yeah, I really want to just be able to hold space for other women in their journeys. And so for some of us, it is not easy to get pregnant. Like you're kind of saying, like, it's like, I'm kind of going to joke, but like somebody sneezes on you and all of a sudden you have the next baby, right? It's like, for a lot of women, they're going through these challenges and it's like in silence. And that to me is the most devastating thing, when we can remove those barriers of being silent and talk about the whole female woman lived experience, however if you identify as a woman as well. So that whole lived experience, and knowing that we're not all going through the same thing. While we might experience similar things, we need to hold space for what the other looks like and not otherize one another, if that makes sense.
Yes. That's another huge, huge point, because we're all having a totally different experience, even though we believe the other person is experiencing the same thing we are.
Yes.
We haven't walked on that journey. We're not on that path. We don't know. And so coming to each other with that, knowing that I'm going to just listen.
Yeah. And one of the things that we're doing over at Period to Pause is we're creating guidebooks for people, or conversation guides. So if you have a friend, who's going through endometriosis and adenomyosis like I am, first of all, most people, not most, a lot of people don't know what endo and adeno are, and that they're cousins and they run together, and what to look out for. Now, if you have a friend or a family member, a child, a cousin, somebody who's going through endo and adeno, they're living with a disease which is a chronic level of pain and a chronic level of hormonal imbalance and mood swings. And the pain I went through with the adeno, I could imagine your daughter probably went through something similar with her endo. It alters your personality. It alters how you show up. And, I think there's also something for people on the other side of it to say, well, how do I approach somebody with this? What's an appropriate question to ask? And the person who has the disease, if somebody's asking you something where it feels a little bit like, whoa, that's not very kind, or it's a little bit off kilter, how do I arm myself to answer those questions in a way that feels authentic to me? And also isn't necessarily ostracizing that person, because we want people to learn about what these things are and what other women might be facing, so that we can start to band together, and be more of a community of support.
Oh, what a great message you have. Do you want to just dive into what the endo and what is the other one?
Adenomyosis.
Adenomyosis.
Mm-hmm. So
I haven't heard of that, Amanda. So
yeah,
bring us up to speed with that. For us that don't know.
So I'll caveat this by saying I'm not a medical doctor, but
your experience from what you've experienced of it, that's what.
So I had have a disease called adenomyosis, which is a cousin of endometriosis. We are more familiar in our society with endometriosis, or endo for short. And what happens with adeno is that you have, with your uterus, you have endometrium, which is growing in the muscle walls, the lining of your muscles of your uterus. So it's growing in places where it shouldn't grow. And then it causes your uterus to be pretty distended, to be bloated. It's an inflammatory disease as well. And then what happens is that when you have your periods, because you can imagine, like, those things aren't shedding appropriately, you can bleed excessively, you have severe pain. In my case, it would normally be 2 to 3 days around my period where I would be literally in the fetal position in a ball, unable to move. Traditional pain treatments generally don't work. So over the counter, ibuprofen, those kinds of things generally don't work for our bodies. And it doesn't get diagnosed very frequently because there's not enough research into these female diseases for those markers to say, okay, these are the things that we're looking out for. They're also not looking at the whole system to say genetically, maybe you have something else that's going on, or maybe it's your diet. So the way they really can truly diagnose endo and adeno is by removing your uterus. However, there are now MRIs and ultrasounds, depending upon the specialist you see, that can see these things in your uterus. With both of these diseases, they can be extremely dangerous because that endometrium can start to grow outside of your uterus onto your ovaries, onto your organs in your body. And so if you don't find treatment, it can be life-threatening. It can be extremely dangerous. In my case, when I did have my uterus removed, what they found was that I also had endometriosis. So I had stage 4 endo that just went undiagnosed for years. I had scar tissue throughout my body, and my adenomyosis was growing around my ureters. And so they had to remove that as well. And there are some early stage interventions they can do today to help. Sometimes the birth control pill helps the pain. There's other things. But it's something I only got diagnosed 4.5 years ago, and I had been suffering with this my entire life. And so, yeah, it's something I think for women, if I want women to hear anything, if you have extreme period pain, it is not normal. If you are bleeding every period through your clothes and, there's so much blood loss. For me, there would be so much blood loss that my doctors were nervous I would hemorrhage or be anemic. There's things that go along with that. If that's something you're experiencing, if you find your mood swings to be really out of control right around your period, or, you're just so doubled over in pain, this is not normal. And if you go to a doctor and all they tell you, which is what I heard for many, many years, is like, oh, you just have bad periods, find a different doctor. Because that is not the case. You should not be suffering like this every single month.
Okay, so my daughter, she really, 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 really was in bad shape with it. And because you look fine on the outside,
Yeah.
she would go to the hospital, the nurses would judge her.
Mhm.
Because she was in excruciating pain, so they thought she was there for the drugs. So she also had stage 4. She had 3 surgeries to scrape and remove, and then they wanted her to get pregnant. So that then, because she couldn't get pregnant, that was herself as well as yourself. All she wanted was a baby. And she was married for 7 years. They tried, and she was told it was all her. And rightfully so, because she's got all these issues going on. Yeah, she got pregnant on a one-night stand when she left her husband. So there's that. Anyway, so it's just kind of funny. Maybe you stop thinking about it and then it comes, right? I'm not sure what happened there, but the pain, and then they'd give her the oxycodone. And now because of car accidents and whatever else, she is now she's labeled as a drug addict, because when this happens and after they do the scraping, she's good for a little while until it starts to build back up.
Yeah.
And it started with her, like you're saying, a lifelong. She was 12 when she doubled over in the garage.
Yeah.
They took her to the hospital. I didn't know what was wrong with her. And they thought her urethra was too short. So they did a little surgery. This was the beginning of the end for her. Like, it was just this constant, I really know your pain because I experienced it with my daughter. And it's something, it's debilitating. Like you're saying, it changed.
Absolutely debilitating. And again, we get labeled as, oh, you're this hysterical woman, or you, women just, get over it. Like, it's like, I hope other people don't have to experience, and I hope they start to do more research on this so we can find other interventions. The drug thing too, for me, they would give me pain meds, and those pain meds would make me vomit. So it's like, on top of everything else, ultimately I found that the best thing for me was going to acupuncture regularly, very regularly, because there are some things that acupuncturists can do on certain pressure points of your body to relieve some of the pain. I also got a medical marijuana card where we used to be living in Massachusetts. And I got a medical marijuana card so that I could find more natural ways to cope with the pain. Unfortunately, I still would be debilitated for at least 2 days a month. And so I would have to plan all of my schedule, my calendaring, my client calls around my period, which is something no woman should have to do. And then I think about women in corporate organizations. What are they doing every month? They can't go to their bosses and say, I'm sorry, I'm bent over in pain. I can't go present today because, I have such a severe period because of my endometriosis or adenomyosis or PCOS, whatever it might be. But it's like, well, why not? Why don't we have concessions like that? We're starting to talk about other things in society like mental health and wellness. Why aren't we talking about women's whole health in a way that's holistic, and so that we don't feel uncomfortable having conversations when it comes to flexibility in working, or the health care you need to be able to manage your pain? So these are conversations I hope we start to have.
It's really, really I think it's big. And I think that it comes in so many different areas, what you're talking about. Like, this is such a huge, huge area. But I think it comes with, for myself, I lost my daughter, the one we're speaking with, right? And my sister and like, there was a lot of trauma that happened all in a very short period of time. And people, you're different now. Like you're saying, you had a body part removed. Well, who am I now? Right. It sounds ridiculous to maybe somebody else who's having to wait for you to get your shit together. And that was really how I have been feeling from family, from people that you wouldn't expect, right? They're tired of having to deal with you with that same issue.
Right. Like, they're tired of you. Could you imagine what we feel like? How tired we are. Like, for me, it was tired in my own body. Like, I had disassociated myself with my body because of navigating the emotional and physical pain. Now I'm integrating myself again. But that's a horrible thing for people to be like, oh, I'm so sick of hearing about your symptoms or your depression or the grief you're facing. We need to allow more grace for people to heal.
Yeah, and like, it comes right back to the judgment, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we're just judging each other, and it's this constant. And so, what is that? What is this all based on? Because it's coming in every area of our lives, right? It's just this constant, not acceptance, is it? And it's society that wants us to have this. You get married, you have the 2.5 kids in the car and the house and this and that. And if you don't have that, you didn't win, right? If you're not left brain and go to school and become a doctor and whatever, then society hasn't set out a box for you.
Yeah.
Right?
I feel like we've put such artificial constructs on one another because people are, I sometimes think it's rooted in fear. People are afraid to be like, oh, wait a second. Like, you can have a life over here that doesn't look like this box that I was told I needed to be in. And that's scary for some people. I also think it's rooted in, like, we in technology now, we have so many ways to otherize rather than to see commonalities. And we're just not having these fruitful, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, where you just, caring, compassionate conversations with folks. And we're just so quick to be like, well, this is how I lead my life. And so if she's leading her life in that way, or this happened to her, I'm going to create a story, and this must be why she's doing this. And rather than to be like, hey, let me take a step back and let me start to listen to your truth and your journey.
Right. This is what we're all trying to learn, I believe, is to listen.
Mm-hmm.
None of us are listening. We're so busy trying to think about what we're going to say when that person pauses for a breath of air.
Yeah. And listen, again, listen without judgment, and be curious. Well, what is it she's saying? I wonder what that must have been like. What must that have been like for you? Are you okay now? Are you, is there a way that I can support you?
Yes, there's the conversation right there, right? How
Mm-hmm.
how can I support you? Because I don't know, right? And that is, but I think you're right, is that it makes people are uncomfortable. And as soon as we get uncomfortable, we go into fear, right?
Yeah.
And we step right out of our alignment with our connection and love, which pretty much is the only thing that is real.
Yeah.
The fear is just thoughts in the head of blah, 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 blah. And I think that when you are stepping out, you become a a little more, like you're saying, right? Like people, it's like, oh, I don't know if I can hang out with her, because then people are going to, you know, she's stepping out and doing something that's not in that box, you know?
Right.
It's really sad, actually.
It's really interesting, is even going through the miscarriages, the things that people said were unbelievable at times. But also people felt like they couldn't be around me, and you already feel alone. So then when people don't want to be around you, that's even more ostracizing, and you even feel worse. And so sometimes, when people are asking me, like my friend just went through a miscarriage, I don't even know what to say. I'm not going to say anything. And I'm like, no, you need to say, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
I'm here to listen. And sometimes it's okay just to go and sit with that person. You don't have to talk. You don't have to speak. You can just be there and be present so that they know you're there. I wish we thought more about those things than I'm going to say the wrong thing or I'm going to do the wrong thing. Sometimes the right thing is just to say, I am here for you. And whatever that looks like for you. And sometimes the person on the other end doesn't know, if you're suffering such a loss, whether it's losing a child like you did or losing children like I did, we don't have to compete against about our pain, and we don't have to know the right answers. We just have to be there for one another, to show that love and to show that compassion and support.
Yeah, you know what? That's the key. And so how does period to pause? How does that, what tools are you sharing with people on how to, because these are old patterns and these are generational patterns, is what I have been working on. And sometimes we don't even realize, we haven't stopped to see ourselves and to see that. I had the same thing. People would say things to be like, oh my God, you look horrible. Really? Thank you very much. You know what? Like, because, oh, I'm really worried about you. Really? That's awesome. Instead of, why can't you just see me well, right? See me well. Don't see me worried. Don't worry about me. See me. I'm sorry, my light thing just fell on the ground while you were talking, and I'm trying not to be doing this, but I don't know what to do with it. Please excuse me. But it's these basic things of just showing up.
Yeah.
And
So
not trying to fix it, right? Like, just get out of your ego. As soon as you're in fixing it, you're in your ego, right?
I think, a couple of things. Yeah. So what we're doing at Period to Pause is saying, number one, providing a safe space to have the conversations. I also have a podcast, which will be launching in the next couple of weeks. We're a little bit delayed due to production. And we're exploring women's issues from period to menopause and everything in between. So not only am I highlighting experts in the space, journalists, also medical practitioners, alternative therapists and practitioners, as well as women sharing their own story. So I hope that people can find some resources in there, and also, again, to feel like they're not alone, so that when they hear these stories from other women, they can take away some tips, or even just a feeling like I have a community to go to. So I think that's number one. Number two is we will be launching these conversation guides to give people resources, whether it's themselves or somebody in their family, their community, and they just want to have a conversation with them. Those will be coming out soon. And then the third thing is really helping. Actually, there's two more. The third thing is helping women to take back their own voices and create their own narratives. So we use the acronym VOICE. So it's really about, number one, verbalizing, vocalizing. Number two, organizing thoughts and plans of actions. I is initiating. So what steps do I need to take, whether that's with my doctor, my family members, creating boundaries, committing to that action plan. And then E, continuing to evaluate and look at, is this still right for me? And how do I implement my healthcare, my boundaries with my family and friends, my conversations? So helping women to navigate that. And then the fourth thing is really around the medical space. So going into medical institutions, organizations, be it hospitals, or doctor's offices, and equipping them with the emotional intelligence, with some trauma-informed training as well, and also equipping those practitioners from front of, the front desk staff to the doctors on the floor to be able to talk to their patients in a humane, compassionate, and caring way. So although we're pretty nascent here, we hope that folks who are listening to this will go and check us out. We hope that we'll provide some resources for people listening. And again, I think most importantly, a safe space to feel like you're not alone.
It's really, really important, really important. And I think that we isolate ourselves when we're not feeling,
Yes.
we're not feeling ourselves. We're trying to find our new footing. And when you don't have that support space, when you don't have a safe space, yeah, that's a difficult thing. So these guidebooks, I believe, are really, really important as well. I mean,
Yes.
you think about just the grieving when somebody's lost somebody, what people don't want to be around you because they don't know what to say because they are uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I know for myself, it's like, there's what do you say? Like, how can you? And that's the first thing that people say. That's the first question that comes into our head, unfortunately, is how do I manage this? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do I say? How do I deal with this? Because how do we view this? This perception doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it is scary for folks. Part of this is also recognizing having self-awareness enough to recognize our own worldviews and not put that on the person who's grieving.
There's the accountability part, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what part of this is mine and how can I
Mm-hmm.
stand in this so that then they can stand in theirs?
And also, how do I continue to see that person as a whole human being?
Yeah.
It feels like at times when you're grieving, people lose sight of your humanity. And it's like that range of emotions is probably the most human thing we have. And being able to be vulnerable and allow space for that, it just goes back to, for me, a question or just a statement to somebody saying, I am sorry, I am here for you. And sometimes even saying, I don't have the right words because I can't understand what you're going through, but I am here for you.
Right. And I think also, like, what you're talking about right there is so important, because myself, I'm clearly empathic and I feel so deeply. I was a hairstylist for 30 years. And when you're touching somebody and they're sharing with you at that level, I would end up to take on the emotions of how they were feeling, which is not a good thing to do, because I was so compassionate and so caring about it. And then at the end of the day, I'd come home with all of this, energy baggage that was not mine. So being there in a space where you're not taking on the energy, and maybe that's what people don't like, is the fact that when they leave, you kind of feel like, now I kind of feel depressed or bombed or lower energy, where I walked in there feeling good and now I'm feeling blah. And nobody wants to feel blah because we believe it's wrong.
Yeah. And so I think two things I'm thinking about with that. One is find some practices for yourself, especially if you're an empath, to block somebody else's energy or to not receive it as your own and to send it back out into the universe with love. I think that's a really important trick. And there's different ways you can do it. One for me is imagining there's a bubble around me and things bounce off the bubble. And then the other thing, I forgot the other thing I was going to say. I do think you said the word wrong. And I think people recognizing that there is no wrong in your emotions. There's no wrong in how you're feeling in a moment. And taking that out of our vocabulary, because this is part of the human experience, and what you go through with this loss and with watching somebody else in your family or your friend circle go through this kind of loss, recognizing that you're having your own emotions, but also the person, for what they're feeling and when they're feeling it, is not wrong. There's no right way around the grief.
There's no time limit.
Nope.
Your 6 months is up. Your 6 months is up. You're not over it yet.
Yeah.
Who says this stuff? They do.
It's
just craziness. And it's just because back to what you were saying, is they're uncomfortable. Yeah. They're in fear. They don't want to deal with it anymore. So they're like, get over it already. right? And it's life altering life. You're not the same person anymore. Your person is somebody new. And then you're having to navigate, who am I and how do I show up now?
Yeah, it's a big one. So I hate to do this, but I'm
gotta
supposed to
go.
have it. I'm supposed to have a meeting at 11. I'm like, oh, I don't want to end this conversation.
We had a little, you know what, we'll chat again, because
Yeah, we can pick this back up.
Amanda, this is awesome. And I really appreciate your time here today. And I would love to let's get this out there. Let's get this conversation going, because your message is so important. And I really, really appreciate you. And
thank you, Jackie.
Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, I appreciate you and your community and all that you're doing to help people heal. So it's really, really important and powerful. So thank you so much for having me here.
For me, a personal mission as well. And I will put your details with our podcast so people can get a hold of you and find out how they can get support.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care. Great to pause.
Yes. Bye-bye.